Okay, great. The stream should be transferred over, and here is the agenda. We'll go over through some client updates, and we're going to talk about Altair, which we have the final little bits to decide on, and then we can do a pre-release. From there, we'll talk about Prater. I know the status seems to be a little bit in limbo. Research updates, general discussion. Okay. So today we can go ahead and get started with Nimbus.
Is it working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fixed. Okay, so we've had our 1.0.10 release this morning. We skipped 1.0.9. There is almost no difference between them except the default. So the main things in the release, we updated our BLST and BRSSL library, and BRSSL includes an up-to-date list of trusted root certificates. So we recommend you upgrade to 1.0.10. And also we are compliant with the 1.0.1 spec, which only includes a very small update to the if1 withdrawal credential. We fixed a number of bugs, in particular one that affected people where we had a crash on some hardware configurations if you built Nimbus from source. We also fixed some long processing delays that were triggered when we received attestations that were actually to current states from before finalization. We have better P2P peer management because we had a lot of inactive connections that could be accumulated. And we have fixed false positive in doppelganger detection when null attestations was received after a significant delay. And in terms of new features, the highlight of the release is an improved format of the slashing protection database. We will roll out the update in 1.0.10 and the next version. So in this version, we will have Nimbus supporting both the old and the new format to have easier rollbacks if needed, but we hope we don't need it. And starting from next version, it will significantly improve, reduce disk load when you have a large number of validators, so thousands or more, mainly for us on pure months, but if we have a large stakers, that would be helpful for them as well. And we have also improved the automatic configuration and detection of external IP addresses.
Got it. Action-packed release. Thank you. Let's go with Lighthouse.
Hey everyone, we've also had a release about 24 hours ago, 1.2.0, includes several improvements to Lighthouse stability and performance, same as Nimbus, I guess, particularly for users running multiple validators. One of the cool optimizations that Paul landed affects our block production times. I believe managed to reduce that by 4 times by introducing a block proposer cache and also running slot processing before the actual proposal window. We're handling beta early blocks, which is going to be good for the overall network. We started pruning the slashing protection database periodically to essentially prevent from it being oversized and slowing down the signing. We've removed the pub key cache file, which caused a few issues historically, and we're storing that information now in the database. We've added the ability for users to set the graffiti from files, also updated our BLS library. Apart from that, some of us have been going through the hard fork spec. Michael provided some extensive feedback. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. Thank you. How about Teku?
Hey everyone. So we've been focusing on the upcoming hard fork. We made some good progress on refactoring beacon state and beacon block body data structures to support versioning. We merged in an implementation of the fork choice balance attack mitigation, although we still need to do more testing and performance analysis on that. We spent some time looking into the block slot fork choice change. We only merged some initial refactorings as it looks like this isn't going to be included in Altair. And we have a pending config update for the new Prater testnet, but we're waiting on the upstream PR to be finalized before we merge that. And that's all I've got. Thanks.
Great. Prysm.
Hey everyone. We have been also working a lot on the hard fork preparation, and similar to Teku, just making sure that our data structures are, can last the test of time. We don't want to have a lot of crazy conditionals or spaghetti code as there are more forks in the future. So just a lot of thinking ahead, a lot of preparations, a lot of refactoring to ensure that it's maintainable. More further work on the standard Eth2 API. We've been working on our optimized slasher implementation. So hoping to release that by the end of this month. And aside from that, just had a release, fairly minor, just some improvements, runtime improvements, and helping improve the experience for stakers. That's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. And Lodestar.
Hey everybody. So we are also still working on getting Altair compatible. So just a lot of refactoring. We just finished refactoring the gossip validation and handling to support different forks. We've also been doing a lot more profiling and adding up metrics just to try to help with some of the performance issues we've seen in the past. We just fixed a memory leak that's haunted us for months and reduced a lot of memory while we're syncing. So things are looking good on that front. And finally, we're working on just proof of concept light client things right now. Like right now, it's looking like exposing the light client sync updates and multi-proofs on some endpoints, and working with like request and response of those things. And then the last thing is we are working on like weak subjectivity state infrastructure, and I'm kind of curious how other teams handle this. Like, how do they distribute these states, or with what frequency they're updating them? And maybe we can ask that question later.
Yeah, cool. We can bring that up. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to discuss Altair. There is kind of a large PR that I've asked a number of you to review that had this 64 epoch boundary processing update, where essentially when there is emptiness, like empty blocks, you forego processing a lot of pretty much everything, most of the validator set, until these boundaries to reduce the load. Based upon feedback from a number of the engineering teams, it's unclear whether this is the proper optimization. It kind of targets, first and foremost, computational load, whereas it is unclear exactly how disk.io comes in, and whether that can be optimized in a similar manner. And so to that, it's also a relatively deep feature. So to that end, I would recommend not putting this in Altair. It seems like that's the recommendation of engineering teams, and that any such optimization to the spec should probably be accompanied with some like R&D on at least one client and some data driving it. Is anyone there's also another feature that was in this that is validator independent leak, inactivity leak, and so there's a leak score array, leak score list that was pulled out into a separate PR, so it can be considered independent. So we can talk about both these things. But first and foremost, is there anyone opposed to leaving this 64 epoch period boundary out? I know we discussed this offline. I just kind of want to let anyone air any grievances. Okay. So there's an independent PR on the leak scores. This is a very nice feature, and when it's independent, it's actually relatively thin, and I think very manageable and a good thing to put into Altair. So there's that PR with some testing, and it's ready to go in. I guess I'm going to merge that this afternoon, unless anyone has some issues here or has a chance to take a look at it today and wants to speak out against it. I think it's a much clearer, cleaner feature than the other, and is not a lot of overhead to implement. And specifically, this attempts to resolve some of the issues that we saw on the testnets where you have, say, a week of leaking, and then you get to finality, and then the leak restarts, and then you drop 1%, and all of a sudden you're not finalizing again. Whereas this offlinedness is kind of tracked independently of each validator, and so if that leak started up again and they hadn't come back online, they kind of start where they were in that quadratic leak. This helps kind of the network resolve partitions in a much cleaner way. Any comment on that? If not, please, if you want, take a look at it. Otherwise, we're going to merge this afternoon in preparation for, I think, tomorrow's pre-release. Okay. Now we've seen some conversation around block slot. Aditya, do you want to give us kind of the status update and what we're thinking on this?
Yep. So there are two pending fork choice pull requests that are open. One of them is 2197, which is block slot. The other is 2101, which was randomized timing for attestations and block production. It looks like we are definitely not going to include them in hard fork 1. And we are most likely going to abandon these because of some issues with how these fixes work and whether they actually solve the underlying problem. So we are definitely going to not include them in hard fork 1. And how we can include them later, whether that becomes a hard fork or just a point of coordination, that is up for discussion. And we can take it on when we have a concrete fix in mind.
Yeah, so especially with block slot, the solution might be worse than the problem, if we don't add any additional mitigations. And that it puts a pretty significant 4-second assumption on latency, and the blockchain just kind of becomes live, not live, and when there is longer than that on block propagation times, which is not great. So we're investigating a bunch of other stuff. We hope to bring some other people in to think about this problem, and there's some leads, but it's just not ready to put into this fork and point of coordination. In terms of the Aditya's right in that most fork choice changes, as long as they're not accompanied with a consensus, like a state transition change, can be done outside of a hard fork. But there's also a potential that it could be coupled with a consensus change. So we shall see. Some of these attacks are somewhat exotic and probably pretty unlikely to be seen in the next 6 months, but we'll keep our ear to the ground in case they emerge. Okay. Networking. Let's see, what do I have there? Okay, there's a open issue on that Age opened up in January, 2183, and there's a fix out for that right now. Essentially, it's a removal of a aggregate attestation propagation condition that was kind of short-circuiting. It wasn't doing what it's supposed to do because of the way the interplay with message ID and some of the way gossip sub works was actually probably inducing more load on nodes than if it were the potential optimization. The attempted optimization was not included. There's a PR for that. This we too will likely merge today. You could potentially do an alternative that does like a type-specific message ID. My gut is that this is probably not worth it, but we can chat about it. If anybody has anything any recommendation on it right now, let me know. Otherwise, check out this PR that's 2225 and the accompanying issue. We can chat there, but this will likely go in very soon. Okay, pretty non-controversial stuff. Where is my agenda? I lost my agenda. 1 second. Too many tabs. Okay, and then we have some exciting test format updates coming out. Is Xiaowei on the call? No. Proto. Oh yes, she is. Would Proto or Xiaowei, would you like to talk about the changes and test updates? Actually, Proto, you probably have a better handle on that with the snappy compression. Can you give us a TLDR?
Sure. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So there was this PR opened in October last year that introduced compression to the test format, so that it wouldn't take as much as like 10 or more gigabytes of test data, but rather like half a gigabyte. So your test setup would have to go through this uncompression step. But aside from that, it's an improvement in the, like a large improvement in the test size. And then later on, we had this issue opened about further improving the test format. Everyone kind of agreed on compression, so we're leaving it at that right now. Maybe in the future, we'll have a more sophisticated test format with deduplication. But right now, this seems like the better and more direct option to reduce the test size for the next hard fork.
Great. And the numbers ran in October. I think we're reducing the outputs from 11 gigabytes to like half a gigabyte. That's probably changed now with an additional fork, but still very significant. And this just adds an .ssc snappy extension rather than just .ssc. And we also remove the .yaml versions of states and operations, which from our understanding and investigation in October, they weren't really used by anybody. Okay. And Xiaowei, what's the status on fork choice tests? Is that we're going to have maybe a sample of that coming out in the pre-release?
Yes, so currently the PR 2202 has showed it's a preview of the incoming test format, and it's a follow-up of Alex Vlasov's previous work. I think it was discussed on the Eth2 spec test repo. So there are some differences between the previous proposal and this proposal. Mainly it's for making it more easy for high spec to generate the test. So you can, if you want to see the test vectors, there are examples of the get head test. And you can check the steps file, which is kind of like our meta configuration, but it shows what are the steps that the client has to check. And let me see. So checks is basically like the assertions. Like you have to check the value if it's equal to the test vectors. And we have the block and attestations files in the test vector output. So currently I use just attestation and the attestation hash roots to present the file name, but I'm thinking I can maybe just use the first 8 bytes or like 4 bytes to make the file name shorter. Yeah. So if client teams have time, you can check the test vectors of 2.2 and see if it would be like some drawbacks in this PR right now. And if there's no further issues, then I will first compute the get head test for clients to try out. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Yeah, so check that out. Any questions for Xiaowei or Proto on some of these test format updates? Great. And as it is a pre-release, if you get into it and there's something that totally didn't make sense in these new formats, just let us know and we can iterate. Okay. Next, I want to talk about Prater. Afri's on the call, who has put together that PR, and there's been some coordination, although I'm not quite certain the status of launch and things like that. So Afri or somebody else want to give us an update on where we stand?
Yeah, sure. So I missed last call, so kind of the backstory was, from how I understand, is that we want to front run mainnet with a testnet that has significantly more validators, and we want to propose this testnet Prater with a bit more than 200,000 Genesis validators, and instead of spamming the girly testnet with a lot of deposits, we decided to pre-populate the Genesis with a certain amount of validators. And Proto was so kind to write a small Go tool to generate a testnet Genesis from a handful of seeds. And this PR on the Eth2 testnets repository is ready to go. So we took the Genesis time from the deposit contract on Girly, which was, I don't know, 11 days ago, and have a custom Genesis delay that puts it to, I think, next week on Wednesday, which should be the 16th of March. And this is ready to be merged. And I think, unless anyone has any comments on that, we can move on with this. And I'm looking forward to Genesis next week. Yeah, regarding Genesis validators, we have pre-populated the Genesis with 210,000 validators. I'm not sure where we stand regarding the let me just pull this up here. We have a spreadsheet. Yeah, I opened all the links except this one. So it's for each client team is 40K validators. We will probably finish distributing the keys before the weekend, hopefully, and then we can make sure that everyone is running their validators next week. I don't know, Proto, did you hand out any keys yet?
No, otherwise I would have updated the spreadsheet.
Okay, yeah. So
I just want to make sure that client teams are ready in terms of infrastructure and have time before Genesis to get things done.
Yeah. So I flagged earlier on the Teku side. So we were advised that the signal to finalize that everything was final would be the merging of the PR. So it hasn't been merged yet, so we haven't done anything. And less than a week just isn't time either to bake the Genesis state into a release or to get the infrastructure up and running reliably. I mean, it's a lot of infrastructure to run this number of nodes. So I think we would request putting back Genesis by a week, just to allow us to get a release out with the Genesis state in, and just to make sure the infrastructure is in place without having to rush and work the weekend and all of that.
That's perfectly fine for me. It's just so I can push this back 1 week, regenerate the genesis, and then we start distribute the keys, and everyone should have enough time next week to prepare clients and set up validators.
Yeah, it's totally fine for me. This is something we need to do. We've identified that we need to do, but it's not critical that it happens next week. So, all right. And Afri, will the PR be merged, or will it stand as is for the next week? But we have all agreed that it's happening. I don't just process here. Thoughts?
So I can merge it. I mean, I have write access, but I was hoping that someone else could just say, okay, this looks good or something, or even someone else merges it so we know this is fine to go. I mean, I can merge it if no one has the bandwidth.
So make the update to the Genesis time and maybe ping on Discord, and I will certainly do a review with a explicit approve, and maybe others will, but we can merge from there. But I think we're all in agreement that Genesis is in 2 weeks.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make sure to have the correct Genesis state in your clients. Changing the Genesis time also affects the state file.
Right. Okay. Is there anything? Well, how do I pronounce this? Prater?
Yeah, sounds good.
Which one?
Prater.
Prater. Okay, great. So is there anything else people want to discuss around Prater before we move on? Excellent. Let's do some research updates. Maybe we'll start with Mikhail. I think you have some merge stuff to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. There is like the open PR with the merge stuff to the spec repository. It contains like the executable beacon chain proposal. So let's drop it to the chat now. This is like a good time to start commenting on it, looking at it, and so forth. It should be like fairly easy to reason about because the amount of change is not that huge. So it requires some like upcoming work, like making the spec executable, running tests, and like creating new tests and supports. But yeah, it's ready for everyone to start looking at it. So that's pretty much it on the merge.
Cool, thank you. Excited to dig in there. Other research updates?
Nothing on the Eth2 side for me this time around.
Got it. Okay, great. Moving on. It was the state of kind of weak subjectivity state distribution, and things like that was brought up by Cayman at the start of this call. Cayman, do you want to pose a question, or does anybody else want to kind of give the state of what people are considering?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious just how y'all are generating the state and then distributing the state. If anyone has any thoughts.
Aditya, what's the status of kind of the format to distribute states and some state providers and stuff in the network right now?
The last time we talked about this, the status was that we're just assuming that we share the state in alternate channels, maybe torrents or somewhere else. We really haven't thought about how to share the state over the Eth2 P2P network. We can try to think about how we can compress the state or break it down into simpler pieces and reduce the load on our P2P network. The main problem seems to be that state sizes are run into a couple of MBs at least, and that would kind of weigh down the P2P network a lot. So this would be a larger research problem to think about.
Yeah, understood. Is anyone planning on cutting these into their releases? I know there's kind of back and forth on that many months ago.
We had talked about it at one point, but we never got around to it.
Right. Okay. I think that there's definitely a desire to kind of have this machinery in place around Altair, so it's probably worth us running through some of the various scenarios and making sure the machinery is in place. Do the command line options generally exist on clients today to be able to start from a state rather than from Genesis?
For Teku, it's a yes.
Gotcha.
We have something in Nimbus, but it's not tested.
Right.
Yeah, Michael's working on this. I think there's a branch that has that feature, but certainly not on stable.
Prysm is working on this as well.
Okay, good. So I think this has been recommended in other contexts, but the kind of targeting this to be in a version 1 for Altair, although it doesn't affect kind of the core specs precisely, I think is a good target. So we can talk about it offline a bit, and we'll bring it up on the next call as well. Kind of check in on the status. Is there anything else to talk about today? I know there's kind of a lot of nebulous items related to that aren't so clearly defined. If people want to chat about them more now, by all means. Otherwise, we can chat about it offline.
I have like one thing that I would like to share as well. It's related to the merge and not the pull request, but yeah. So I'll drop it to the chat. This is like the proposal by Dan Krat which is about deferring the execution by a slot. So the idea behind this is to give like more time for testers and for proposers in the next slot to execute transactions of the previous block. It has its own trade-offs, but it'd be great to chat about it, discuss it, and yeah, for those who are interested, take a look at it.
Right, so it delays the commitment to the state root until the next slot so that you can continue computation throughout the entire slot, right?
Yeah, right. So like the proposer of the block is like the sequencer for the current application payload and the executor of the previous one. So that's the idea.
Right. Okay, take a look. Okay, moving on to general spec discussion, just general discussion. Anything else people want to talk about today?
Anything about merge plans to talk about, or do we still want to have more time to formulate the options?
Options with respect to
speeding it up.
So I think next thing that we plan on doing is doing a public call, maybe next week, definitely by the following week, to kind of invite at least a member from each team to begin allocating resources to it. That's the main speed up, other than getting specs written, which is now in the works.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think you and I have talked about this, and a number of Mikhail and I've talked about this, in that the way the specs are going to be written are going to be the most minimal merge on the first pass, and that's the first target people can begin working on, and that can even be what we bring to mainnet. That might forego a handful of features, including say, validator withdrawals. You could go to mainnet without that and do a fork 3-4 months after. So definitely in terms of speed up, that's also a strategy, is to really scope the tightest version of it.
Yeah, and like the what also was discussed for a bit is like the consensus upgrade is what Danny just referred to. Is separated from the merging the like application chain with the beacon chain, which means that the application chain history will retain, and this like merging the chains is going to be like a separate separate upgrade to get through the governance and other procedures.
Right. And some of that might seem a bit abstract. Mikhail and I are both working on kind of technical roadmap documents that we plan on sharing soon that show kind of the dependencies and the minimal version of the merge and things like that. So we'll make it more concrete soon. Anything else today? Okay. Very chill call. I appreciate it. We are on the final little bits of getting a Altair pre-release out to you. Thank you for sprinting ahead, taking a look at those features, and getting code bases ready. I imagine there's going to be kind of a round of feedback there that we're going to want to do, and some implementation work that we're going to want to do before we set a date. But definitely still targeting that approximate June date at this point. So great. Thank you. Take care. We'll talk to you all very soon on the internet, and we'll have another call in 2 weeks. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.